Hey guys, welcome to Bookish Islander. My name is Juan. I hope you're all doing very well. Today I'm here to do my September wrap-up. In September I read 5 new releases, or at least 5 novels that were released in 2019. The first of which was Ocean Vuong's On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, which I talked about in a previous video. This novel was one that I approached with certain apprehension. I wasn't sure it was going to be my thing, and I was right. It wasn't my thing. I know that Ocean Vuong's a poet. I haven't read any of his poetry, but reading On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, I could tell that he has potential. He has potential talent to be a novelist, and I'd be curious to see where he goes next, because his first novel was such a first novel. He talked a lot about his own life and his own experience, and I think one of the problems with the novel is that he tried to talk about too many things in a short novel, so the whole thing fell short for me. But I look forward to future books by him. I'll keep an eye on his prose production. If he should come out with a novel or a short story, I would be sure to read it. Then I read My Sister the Serial Killer, which is a novel that was long listed for the Booker Prize, but it did not make the short list. I read it because it seemed like many people had read it. I was looking for something that was fairly short, easy to read, and potentially fun, and My Sister the Serial Killer is a success in all 3 camps. It's not a book that I will possibly ever reread, and it's a book that I would only recommend if you're looking for something short and fun to read. But if there is a book that I read last month in September that did not work for me, that's Lanny by Max Porter. I didn't read his first novel. I know that it was divisive, to say the least. I think Lanny's also divisive. From what I gather, it's one of those either love it or hate it books, and I think I belong to the hate it camp. I appreciated at the beginning of the book I think was quite strong. I was getting into it, and then at some point it just fell apart and I ended up hating it, but some people love it. So I don't know, give it a go if you're interested. I wouldn't personally recommend it, but I know that there are people out there who absolutely loved it. So check it out and find out for yourself is all I can say, I guess. More successful for me was reading The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. This is the novel that follows after The Underground Railroad, which is a novel that did not work for me. I could not quite connect with it. I didn't like the approach to the narrative. The Nickel Boys, however, is told in a more matter-of-fact way and without the made-up elements that I think got in the way of my enjoying The Underground Railroad. So I would recommend The Nickel Boys. It's based on a true story. It's heartbreaking. It's not the easiest read because of the scenes of abuse and bullying that it portrays. However, the writer does not in any way get gratuitous in the narrative. I think despite the heaviness of the subject matter, the book is not as hard to read as it could be, and I would recommend it, I think, to everyone. And the final new release that I read was The Testaments by Margaret Atwood, and this is the follow-up to her 1986 novel The Handmaid's Tale, but it feels like it's the follow-up to Hulu's streaming series, The Handmaid's Tale, rather. It's a book that I enjoyed reading a lot. I know that there are people on BookTube that hated the book, that thought it was really bad, and I'm not going to say they're wrong. I mean, they're probably right. However, I did enjoy reading it, and I can't lie about that. I enjoyed reading it. I read it, I think, over just 2 days, and it was fun. I had so much fun reading it. It's not a book that I would pick up again, probably, and I think The Handmaid's Tale, even though it's far from a perfect novel, I think it's a lot more complex than this new sequel. But if you've read The Handmaid's Tale and want to go back, revisit that universe and perhaps find out more, then I would recommend The Testaments. Otherwise, I think it's not a book that you should make an effort to try to read just because there's some buzz around it and a lot of hype. It's been shortlisted for the Booker Prize, so who knows, you know, it might win. I don't think it will win. I don't think it should win. But it just might, because we never know, because we're in the time of Brexit and Donald Trump, so I guess anything could happen. September was also the month where I started my Booker Prize Through the Decades project, and in case you don't know what that's about, it's a project whereby I read all the Booker Prize winning novels, and I do that by decade. So I started with the current decade, I started by reading the Finkler question from 2010. And the idea is to read up until this year's winner, which will be announced this month, now in October 2019. Then I will go back and pick another decade and do the same thing and keep going until I've read all the Booker Prize winners. So this month, like I said, I started with a Finkler question and I made a review, so go check it out if you want to know more about my opinion on this book. Then I read The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes, which I had more mixed feelings about, but I also enjoyed, and I definitely enjoyed more than I'd ever enjoyed anything else by Julian Barnes. I'm not a fan of his writing, but I think this is the best book by him that I have ever read. Having said that, I haven't read all his books, so there could be others out there that I would enjoy more. I don't know. I guess I'll find out if I decide to read more by him. The next winner of the Booker Prize was Bring Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel. I read that, I enjoyed it. It's a Tudor historical novel and it's a sequel to Wolf Hall, which I had never read. So actually I went back and read the prequel, the Wolf Hall, which is the first book. And yeah, I haven't made a review of Wolf Hall because it doesn't fit into the current decade that I'm reading and reviewing at the moment, but I talked briefly about it in one of my previous Friday reads, so go check them out. There's a playlist, you know, if you want to see my initial thoughts on it. But I did make a full review of Bring Up the Bodies, which is also, I think, part of a Friday reads video. So yeah, go check it out if you want to know what I thought. I'm not really a reader of historical novels, so this was challenging for me, or it wasn't I mean, reading the books wasn't challenging, but reading historical novels was a challenge of sorts for me, and it's a challenge that I relished. It didn't make me curious to read other historical novels. Reading those two books didn't turn me into a fan of the historical novel or of historical fiction, but I did enjoy them, and now I look forward to the third installment, which I believe comes out in March 2020. And rare for me, I also read some non-fiction. I read Regarding the Pain of Others, which is an essay by the late Susan Sontag. This was a recommendation by Lukash at Totally Pretentious, and I really liked it. It was a short essay about pain. I talked about it in my previous Friday read, so again, go check it out if you want to know more about my opinion on this book. I think I'd like to read more by Susan Sontag, particularly her nonfiction, and possibly a couple of her novels too. But mostly what I got out of this experience is that I do enjoy reading nonfiction. So perhaps in coming months, I don't know about October because it is Victober, so there are a lot of Victorian fiction to get through, and if you want to see the big books that I'm reading, go watch my Victober TBR, because I definitely believe that I was overambitious, so I don't know how I'll do with that. But anyway, as long as I finish Middlemarch, I'll consider myself a success. But yeah, I'd like to read more nonfiction in the future, and I have a few titles there, and not just by Susan Sontag, that I would want to read in the coming months. And finally, I read 2 books in Spanish. I didn't read anything in Portuguese, which really shocks me. Or rather, I probably did read in Portuguese, but I didn't finish any Portuguese language books. And now I feel really bad about it because I have so many Victorian novels that I want to get through in October that I don't know if I'll have time to read in Portuguese, but I feel that I should really go back to it because I feel like my Portuguese language, the knowledge of Portuguese that I have, it's slowly slipping away from me, so I really need to read Saramago or something else. But anyway, at least I read 2 books in Spanish, so that's fine. The first one was A Sangre y Fuego by Manuel Chavez Nogales, which is set, and it was written in the 1930s. It's a collection of short stories all set during the Spanish Civil War. It's amazing, it's brutal. It should be a must-read for anyone who wants to know about the 20th century in Europe, or in Spain in particular. I loved it. It wasn't the easiest read because of the subject matter. However, his writing, it's so evocative and so great that I would recommend this book to anyone. I don't know if English translations are easy to find. The book was translated early on in the 1930s, but I don't know if it's been translated again or if the English language translations are in circulation still, but look up the name of the writer, which is Manuel Chavez Nogales, and see what you can find if you're interested. And the second novel, which I know that it's available in English, French, and in other languages, is La Barraca. So the English language title is The Cabin, which is more or less a literal translation. This is from the late 19th century. I think it was first published in 1898. And it's by Valencian writer Vicente Blasco Ibáñez. This is a naturalist novel. It has a lot of gruesome detail, but it's so amazing. He was so good at plotting that I just couldn't stop reading this book when I picked it up. I picked it up on Sunday and I finished it by Monday. This was also a buddy read, which I did with my boyfriend. So we were both so much into it that we just wanted to keep reading until we finished. It was a great experience. I recommend this book, absolutely, particularly if you can read it in Spanish. I think it's an amazing read. This is a very old edition that you can see here. It's not an edition that it's meant to look old. It is an old edition, and this belonged to my grandfather's. He had the whole collection, all the works by Blasco Ibáñez. He was a great fan of his writing. These books now belong to my mom, this book and the rest of the collection, or at least the tomes that were salvaged. I don't know if all of them survived, but this definitely did, and it's one of the best. You know, I have memories of seeing this book around and other books by this writer around so much that I didn't feel inclined to read them, but something possessed me on Sunday. It was possibly because, as you might know if you follow global news, we had a total blackout on the island of Tenerife that lasted for around 10 hours, and that meant that about 1 million people had no electricity at all during Sunday afternoon and into the early evening. So no TV, no internet. That was great. I think that made me pick up this book, even though I'm reading a lot of other things, and I really enjoyed it, so I recommend it. And that concludes my September wrap-up. Those are all the books that I finished in September. If you follow my Friday reads, you'll know that I'm also reading a lot of things, and I've been reading a lot of things in September, but they were too long that I couldn't finish them without the month, and that's fine. I like to take my time with reading. Just let me know what you've been reading yourself. What books did you read in September? Also, if you're interested in any of the books that I mentioned in my wrap-up and you want to discuss them, let me know in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you again very soon. Bye-bye.